It always comes first to all of us. It demands everything and gives everything for us. I'm talking about family, that centerpiece of our lives, the place of origin, that gives us a sense of meaning and empowers us with purpose. You may be searching for one, starting one, or involved in one. We hope that through this season, you will explore with us the purpose, plan, and power of our families in shaping our lives through hearing our stories and sharing yours. In this sixth season of Let Us Go Deeper podcast, we look forward to learning and equipping you with resources and reasons to more faithfully and fulfillingly engage and contribute in building a healthy family. Welcome to Season 6 of Let Us Go Deeper, the podcast. First, I was doing some research about this episode we're about to go into, and there's this new term about our culture that I came across that I thought captured the moment we find ourselves, at least in this time, which is we live in the hypersexualized age, in the sense that everything from selling toothpaste to a car to selling you even very, very basic things, some sense of sex is introduced into it. And so the secular world has somehow really hyped out the whole idea of sex.
But this is nothing new. I mean, God himself used sex to sell the idea of marriage and procreating. He says, be fruitful and multiply. Every religion in antiquity had their cult prostitutes. Sex was involved in even religion back then. So I'm saying this is nothing new. What is new is that we have technology that is able to make it more prevalent and it's in your face. But sex has always sold and will always sell because we are sexual beings.
Yeah, it's interesting because I wonder where that line is drawn, because then it loses that sanctity and that speciality that it has. But also on the other side, there's a sense, at least out in the culture, that the spiritual side of it, from the believing people, sex is much more sanctioned and there's more restrictions around it, and that in some way God is not for sex. It's this taboo topic, this necessary evil, as you called it the other day.
We will come to that, but remember you started off saying that we are in a hypersexualized culture, and then you went off to religion having these taboos and stuff. So let's take it step by step. Perhaps that will help us in this topic. In the first place, God had an idea. He says, I want to make many human beings, but I could just call them into existence, or I could create a process by which they are procreating. So he made man, and then he made woman. And he said, multiply, replenish, or fill the earth. Now, how would they do this? How would they do this, Joel?
Through sex.
Right. So God said, I'll give you a tool to help you fulfill this mandate. But it will be the most pleasurable tool and the most pleasurable job you will ever do, because it will give you pleasure and joy and a connection with your partner. And so he gave sex.
Yeah, and I liked how you framed it earlier on about the three main purposes of sex, which is pleasure,
yes,
bonding, and procreation.
Yes, pleasure, bonding, procreation. A multi-use tool, the sex. And then he says, go and make many human beings and teach them and train them and just fill the earth. So that is where sex came from. And in God's plan, this was a very simple, straightforward thing to do. And there has to be something that will bring John and Mary together. Something that will bring Holly and Joel together. That's attraction, that sexual attraction that happens between two human beings. That would bring them in this close circle to then have children. So with that said, we recognize that sex symbolizes the oneness of the couple. Because God told them, read it for me please, Genesis 2, 24 and 25.
That reads, "For this cause will man go away from his father and his mother, and be joined to his wife, and they will be one flesh. And the man and his wife were without clothing, and they had no sense of shame."
Right. So the only person other than your parents when you were small, and maybe your doctor if you're having a physical exam, that you actually bear yourself to and not feel embarrassed, is your spouse or that beloved person. So sex represented that intimacy and closeness, the oneness that a man and woman would share when they came into a relationship of love and marriage. So sex was also symbolic of two becoming one. And the fact that they weren't ashamed means that sex was never about shame. It was about joy and pleasure of having someone who knows you, someone that you know, someone you could be intimate with and not feel you have to cover up. So that is what Moses is speaking about there. From that point, we see therefore that sex heightens the emotional bond. It heightens intimacy. It indicates the uniqueness of this relationship. Husband and wife share a unique relationship. And therefore, in this divine plan, sex was a beautiful instrument for bonding, for procreation, for intimacy, for pleasure.
Yeah, and so even looking at the topic that we are handling this season of family, you are saying that at the core of what triggers, ignites, and sparks what starts a family is that actual experience of sex.
No, the attraction, the sexual attraction, in order to have sex.
Right.
Is what starts it. In fact, Songs of Solomon, which is the book that we're kind of basing this episode on, says something beautiful in Solomon 1, 15 and 16.
That reads, "See, you are fair, my love. You are fair. You have the eyes of a dove. See, you are fair, my love, my loved one, and a pleasure. Our bed is green."
What that simply is saying is there's an attraction.
Right.
He says your eyes are fair, you're like a dove, and there's an attraction, a passionate attraction that happens between a man and a woman. That is the first step in the process of becoming a family. When a man meets a woman and becomes attracted to her and desires intimacy, physical intimacy even, that is the first step. And so this book of Song of Solomon, and we shall read some more later, is an ode. It's like a celebration of happy, guilt-free, consistent sex. This book of Solomon.
Why are those qualities specifically that you've mentioned important?
Because earlier on you were hinting at the misuse and abuse of sex, of the taboo and restrictions around sex that even happens within Christianity. So I had to mention the fact that this book, inserted into this holy book, right, was meant to celebrate happy, guilt-free, passionate, consistent, long-lasting love, sex.
Yeah, and really the reason I set it up the way I did at the beginning is to show the two extremes that exist. And
Right.
I think one function that the book of Songs of Solomon serves is to bring back that balance that is necessary for us to really position sex where it should be.
Why the word balance? I think it's really more to celebrate, so that you and I as Christians could celebrate our sexuality, our humanity, and the love we share with our spouse.
But under those kind of boundaries or terms that you've shared, where it's guilt-free, where it's happy, where it's this thing that becomes joyful to enjoy, because clearly there are a lot of risks when it's put outside of that context.
And we're going to come to that too. See, here what I wrote here, something that I thought was beautiful. The Song of Solomon is an ode to happy love and sex. It celebrates the joy and goodness of human love between the sexes, between man and woman, and the sense of inner fulfillment and harmony that arise from this romantic, passionate, sexual love. Are we still together?
Mm-hmm.
Song of Solomon portrays love in its spontaneity, its beauty, its power, and exclusiveness. In other words, you are mine, I am yours. It also shows how love is experienced in the ups and downs of life. You know, sometimes in the book you see separation, and yet we see intimacy. We see anguish, we see ecstasy, we see tension, we see contentment, because life happens. Life is up and down. And so in this marriage relationship of love, we can face these vicissitudes of life, the ups and downs, separation, anguish, tension, together. And sex comes and binds us and helps us to relieve some of the anguish. But what is interesting, the interesting thing, Joel, is that this Song of Solomon is a love poem. And it uses a lot of sensuous and suggestive language. You heard what I said? Sensuous and suggestive language and images drawn from nature. I like that. So read verse 2 for me, please. Song of Solomon, verse 2. What does it say? Do you have it readily?
Yep. That's chapter 1, verse 2.
Yes.
That reads, "Let him give me the kisses of his mouth, for his love is better than wine."
Wow, better than wine even. Now read 8:14. Song of Solomon 8:14.
8:14.
Yeah.
Hopefully I can be able to pull that up quickly. 8:14 reads, that reads, "Come quickly, my loved one, and be like a roe on the mountains of spice."
Yes. So notice it starts with desire and ends with desire. It starts with, "Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth." Wow. And it ends with her saying, "Come, enjoy all the delicacies that you have, like a gazelle on the mountain, just prancing and eating the grass." So notice it begins with that desire, just for that initial intimacy of kissing, and ends with the desire for total fulfillment in sexual harmony and love. So this book really shows what God thinks about sex.
Yeah, two things jump right out of it for me. This week, I was reading, I forget the exact specific text in Proverbs that says, when desire comes, it bears the tree of life.
Right.
And it's interesting that now you're framing even the book of Songs of Solomon in terms of desire, because clearly then desire produces those things that we've been talking about, that brings this fulfillment that can be representative of the tree of life.
And literally it creates life.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing that actually that I'm seeing even as you read through that is the fact that when we read Genesis 2:25, the nakedness and the lack of shame, it seems to me that Songs of Solomon is sort of an expansion of what that looks like.
Yes. In fact, when you begin to read, every time I read this book, I smile because I could just see the image of two young lovers, how they admire each other. He says, "Your neck is like a tower, your breasts are like two fawns, your hips, your waist." And she says, you are so masculine and ruddy and handsome. I mean, they are really going into each other physically. Oh, by the way, sometimes people think that when you're a Christian and you're married, you no longer need to look beautiful and sexy and beautiful. As we can see here, part of the attraction, what brought me to you was your physical charms. And part of what keeps me interested are your physical charms. And the Song of Solomon is not embarrassed to talk about their physical appearance, how beautiful each other looks. That's something just to be in mind.
Is it a problem that you observe? Why that particular note?
Yeah, it is a problem I have noted. For one thing, when people get married, they kind of relax. Well, the dog is already penned up, the cow is already chained to the barn, so I could just relax. So we lose our sense of exercising, we gain weight, we dress dowdy at home, we seem to get careless. And what we say is, anyway, you have to love my soul and love my spirit. And it's what's inside. But like I always tell people, nobody sends a Christmas gift wrapped in newspaper.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting, Pastor, because I think it's a real challenge because, again, as we say, marriage tends to move from a high point on those initial phases and then just plateaus out.
And sometimes plateaus and then
drops even further.
So I want to read something here. You can look for it as well. Song of Solomon 4. It's a little long passage, but I think it's worth reading. Reading from verse 7. I'll read some, and when you're ready to join, you can just tell me when you're ready to.
I'm ready. Let's go.
Oh, how beautiful you are, my darling. There is no flaw in you. Come with me from Lebanon, my bride. Come with me from Lebanon. Descend from the crest of Amana, from the top of Senir, the summit of Hermon, from the lion's den and the mountain haunts of the leopards. You have stolen my heart, my sister, my bride. You have stolen my heart with one glance of your eyes, with one jewel of your necklace. How delightful is your love, my sister, my bride. How much more pleasing is your love than wine, and the fragrance of your perfume than any spice. Your lips drop sweetness as the honeycomb, my bride. Milk and honey are under your tongue. The fragrance of your garments is like that of Lebanon. You are a garden locked up, my sister, my bride. You are a spring enclosed, a sealed fountain. One note here. You are a garden locked up. What do you think that means?
You are an orchid that is...
You are a virgin.
Yeah.
Just as you lock your garden, meaning no one could just pass through and out. So he's telling her part of his love and attraction is the fact that she's pure. She's chaste.
She's preserved.
Yeah, I like that. She's preserved. You're a garden locked up. Your plants are an orchard of pomegranates with choice fruits, with henna and nard and saffron, calamus and cinnamon, with every kind of incense tree, with myrrh and aloes and all the finest spices. You are a garden of a fountain, a well of flowing water streaming down from Lebanon. So hear what she says to him. This is the guy speaking here. Now hear the woman speak. Awake, north wind, and come, south wind. Blow on my garden, that its fragrance may spread abroad. Let my lover come into his garden and taste its choice fruits. And now the lover steps in, chapter 5, verse 1. He says, I have come into my garden, my sister, my bride. I have gathered my myrrh with my spice. I have eaten my honeycomb and my honey. I have drunk my wine and my milk. And all the friends said, eat, O friends, and drink. Drink your fill, O lovers. So what we are seeing here is the culmination, the consummation of marriage. The passion, the desire that drives us to marriage. And here they are now experiencing intimate love. And this is like the honeymoon. So the friends, like we do when we go to a wedding, enjoy your honeymoon way. And we give them nice lingerie to take for their honeymoon. So the friends are saying, eat your full.
Yeah.
Enjoy it.
Yeah. So Pastor, I think even as I listen to you read, one thing that I'm wondering for the young people of our time, for people who are getting into that age of getting married and getting into that age of, even people who are in marriage as it is, how do we appropriate this language? Because there are many aspects of that are not relatable to a 21st century American or even African or European,
right.
You know? And so how do we take that language and derive the kind of things you're seeing? Because clearly there's certain things you're seeing that are so powerful and appealing.
Yes. And that's a fair statement and concern. How do we take this language, this beautiful poetic language, and translate it to us? Well, you are the sunshine of my life. That's a song. That's taking this language and bringing it to this world. You are the sunshine of my life. That's why I'll always be around. You know, I'm so dizzy, my head is spinning. Again, these are songs that take this kind of a language and bring it into our world, because he says, you stole my heart with one glance. He says, I'm so dizzy, my head is spinning like a whirlpool. It never ends. So what we want young people to know even is, while this language reflects that time and culture, if you could only glimpse that this guy is in love, He's waxing poetic.
Because it's funny, because if I sense that if somebody was to sing a song and make a song out of that book and sing it out there, probably as a Christian, you may look at it and be suspicious about their motives because of how the kind of language that is being used. But yet that is biblical.
Yes.
A love song, really.
It is a love song. And you notice while I was reading, I was smiling simply because I was juxtaposing in my mind your typical frumpy Christian frowning and looking down on young people expressing this love, and these two young lovers. And I am seeing like God smiling and saying, that is exactly what I was hoping for. When I brought Eve to Adam, that kind of response, that sort of Jacob and Rachel, when he saw Rachel and fell in love with her, love at first sight. You know, love is beautiful. Mm-hmm. We've all experienced it, at least most of us have. And that thrill, that joy. Do you remember the first time Holly touched your hand?
Yes. Very special. Very
you
unique.
Felt an electricity and you're like, I'm not going to wash my hand for 2 weeks, you know. that kind of thrill. God created that. And he wants us to enjoy it. And like I said before, Song of Solomon is a celebration of happy, guilt-free marital love and sex and passion and desire. And the very fact that the friends are saying, go eat your fill, shows that this marriage, this intimacy is approved of.
It's bounded by the community.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And that is why...
Is that an important part of our sexual lives? Community?
Swim a little more in that pool.
No, I'm saying, in terms of what you're referencing, it seems that there are these other people also seeing other people, these two enjoying their intimacy and encouraging them along. Does that indicate a role for community to participate?
Participate in the context of maintaining and allowing these young people to remain pure and chaste as much as possible, giving them good principles, teaching them what love is all about, giving them the tools for happy marriage, and also helping them in their choice even sometimes. Guiding them in their relationship. Like I remember when I first started courting with Cynthia and stuff, there were other people who said, Cynthia, keep your eye on Cynthia. She's a wonderful young woman. She kept herself, even while you were away studying and pastoring in Colombia, she kept herself. There were people who were like, wow, we love this. And when it's time for the wedding, people bring their gifts and they're all celebrating. The sense is there should never be guilt in sex or in love. And that is why when a young couple gets married, especially with the blessing of their parents and their relatives and the community, there is such joy in the ceremony, such joy in the marriage even. And sometimes even to give you support when things are rough, because every marriage goes through some rough times, to have the support of your church community, of your family and those around. So yes, community plays a part in saying this is correct, this is right, we approve, we give our blessing, and we give our support.
So, Pastor, this is the positive side of it. And
the great side.
The great side.
The ideal side.
The ideal side.
What God had in mind.
Yes, but clearly, in the real world, there are a lot of downsides to this whole area of sex.
True. Life happens. And we do not live in that ideal world that God planned. And that is why in this podcast, we want to look at this issue as real as possible, because we are all living this. And if not personally, there's someone we know who is going through these situations. So here is something, Joel. Sex is what drives us to want to be married, with very, very, very few exceptions. Most of us, it was the desire to have that person of my dreams, that girl, that guy that I love, that I feel all thrilled when he looks at me, when his hand brushes mine. Yet, sex becomes one of the first casualties of marriage. And I think that is so sad. In fact, Song of Solomon has a very funny situation. Chapter 5, verse 2 and 3.
And as I read, Pastor, be thinking about why is that the case? Because I would love to hear why you have made that observation.
Okay.
I am sleeping, but my heart is awake. It is the sound of my loved one at the door, saying, "Be open to me, my sister, my love, my dove, my very beautiful one. My head is wet with dew, and my hair with the drops of the night. I have put off my coat. How may I put it on? My feet are washed. How may I make them unclean?"
There isn't a husband in the world who cannot identify with this little scenario here. The picture painted here is that of an unresponsive wife or lover to a husband, to her approaches. So he comes knocking at the door, "Let me come in." Picture what that could mean. "Let me come in, my dear. I'm wet. I need to come in and feel your embrace, your warmth." And she said, "But I'm tired. I've already taken off my clothes. I've already washed my feet." By washed my feet, this is saying, back in the East, people walked dusty roads. So when they got home and they were ready to lie down, they would wash their feet from the dust from walking, and they would take off their outer coat. So obviously, to get up and open the door would mean walking again, getting your feet dirty, putting back on your coat. So she's saying, "Hey, I'm tired. I've already taken off my coat, washed my feet. I don't want to come." An unresponsive lover. Here's a man, a husband, approaching his wife who says, "Look, I'm too tired. The children, I've been dealing with the kids all day. I've been cooking. I'm too tired." And so he goes away. Later on, you will see where he goes away. And then she gets up to look for him, showing that sometimes the man and maybe turns his back on her and he's angry and he's all grouchy the next day. And she realizes, oh, I should have been more responsive. So what we see here is that life happens. The children, the bills, the neighbors, issues with the house, the washing machine broke down. Life happens. And in this life happening, the passion, the joy of each other's company begins to suffer and to give way to the other pressures of life. And that is one of the sad things about marriage, is that sometimes, with all the other things happening, that passion, that joy, that sex that brought us together falls by the wayside. Sometimes it even dies.
So, and the statement you made initially of it being the first casualty, why? I wanted to understand a bit more why you came to that realization.
Because most of the other things that we enjoy in marriage, the friendship, the communication, the spiritual pursuit, the nurturing of the children, keeping our home in good shape, all of these things tend to keep going on. A wife will continue to cook, to wash, to clean. A husband would continue to work and provide for the family. Even if they may be upset with each other, even if they had a falling out. But then that expression of love, if I'm angry with you, if I'm tired, if I have other things to do, we always put that aside. That's why I said it's a casualty, maybe the first casualty.
Is that a dangerous thing for the marriage?
Of course. It is a dangerous thing because you're robbing the marriage of a very integral part of the glue of the joy of that marriage. In fact, oftentimes sex or the lack of it could become a thermometer of what's really happening in that relationship. And that is why, as we look at it, we must recognize then that sex becomes that icing, that sugar in your lemonade, that tells you life is good, this is good. And when that begins to suffer, other things begin to suffer gradually as well. And like I said, oftentimes, sex in a marriage or the lack of it may be a great thermometer of what's really happening.
So how should couples work through that denial phase, if I was to call it that?
Good question. First of all, let's back up a bit and put a few other suppositions, a few other thoughts about sex in marriage. Sex should increase intimacy and be an expression of love in marriage. Oftentimes, it doesn't. Instead of being an expression of love, it's sometimes just an expression of, I need to get my sexual desires met, or I'm just doing this because I'm supposed to. And instead of increasing intimacy, many couples never quite bond in their lovemaking. It becomes just that necessary evil sometimes. Sex should be a tightening of the bond, yet oftentimes it isn't. It becomes a painful chore for a wife whose husband she thinks is not giving her the kind of attention, or of a husband who thinks my wife isn't responding to me as she should. And oftentimes it's used as a weapon or a tool. I'm going to withhold to teach him a lesson. Or I'm going to negotiate. If you do this, then I'll do this. If you allow me to, then I'll buy that gift you want. So it becomes a negotiating tool rather than just this spontaneous, happy expression of the love we have, the intimacy that we share, and the pleasure we have in each other's presence. But perhaps those, Joel, because marriage is stable and predictable, sex becomes boring in marriage. There's a tendency in marriage for sex to become boring because it's predictable, it's stable, it's expected, it's right there, it's always available. And there is something in human nature to take things and people for granted once they're in your possession. Are you still with me?
Mm-hmm.
There's just something in all of us that if something is readily available, if I'm familiar with it, to take it for granted. There is no one who has not had a brand new car, who for 6 months won't eat in it, wash it every weekend and do all these things. And then after a while, it's like, we don't take care of it anymore. When you're on your new job, the first week or two, you're there early and you're working. But then as time goes by, it's just human nature. And we do the same thing in marriage with our spouse and with sex. Because you see, sex needs excitement, unpredictability, uncertainty even, and novelty to keep sparking and firing on all cylinders. And in marriage, there's so much stability and predictability and stuff that, there's a loss of interest also. Because we can almost anticipate what each one will do. And we know each other so well. So that's one of the big reasons why sex in marriage tends to taper off, because the excitement level begins to die. And then when you bring in children and bills and work and everything else.
Yeah. So, Pastor, let's move then quickly to the other aspects that are corrosive to this whole idea of sex. Premarital sex and extramarital sex. Those are two very pernicious effects on this sacredness and the sanctity of sex itself.
Right. In Song of Solomon, actually, chapter 8, let's look at verse 8 to 10.
That reads, "We have a young sister, and she has no breasts. What are we to do for our sister in the day when she's given to a man? If she is a wall, we will make on her a strong base of silver. And if she is a door, we will let her be shut up and with cedar wood. I am a wall, and my breasts are like towers. Then was I in the eyes as one to whom good chance had come."
Right. Again, that same poetic language. What do you think a wall means? If she's a wall?
It means an obstacle, a barrier.
Right. But if you look carefully, right, if she's a door, we will enclose her. What would a door represent? A wall as opposed to a door?
An opening, an entry point.
Right. So in other words, her brothers are saying, here's our little sister. She's a teenager. She's growing up. She hasn't even developed her feminine child. Is she slack? Does she seem to be an easy one? Is she the kind of girl who looks for love in all the wrong places? If she's a wall, meaning she knows her value. So no guy could just come into her and have relationships with her. Then we will celebrate her. If she's a door, meaning she swings in, you push, she swings open. We need to step in and encircle her and prevent her from selling her out. But she then says, I am a wall and my breasts have grown, meaning she's no longer a little girl. And she went through puberty and her early teenage years and maintained her virginity, her purity. So now she says, because I've been a wall, because I've been firm and I preserved myself, I'm expecting now happiness. I'm expecting now that the man who falls in love with me will be proud of me. Because let's be honest, every man would like to know he's marrying
a beautiful woman, a good woman,
who is also
a virgin.
Yes. Because for us, and I guess even for women as well, but especially for men, a woman being a virgin means she is pure, she is faithful, she is steady. I could trust her.
Mm-hmm.
If not, then can I really trust her? And so she is celebrating the fact that she remained pure. So when we talk about premarital sex, we are talking about young people who don't understand the beauty of guilt-free, faithful sex within marriage. And if I've been here, I've been Tom, I've been with Dick, I've been with Harry, I've been with Susie, I've been with Sharon, I've been with Sheila, I begin to get confused. I become like a door back and forth. My emotions are here and there. There are things I pick up from Sheila and from Susie. There are things I pick up from Tom and Dick that I then take into my marriage that could taint it. So when we talk about premarital sex, we are talking about someone who couldn't wait, who couldn't delay gratification. But more than that, in biblical context, there was no premarital sex because sex represented the consummation of marriage. So you will be betrothed, like engaged to someone. This could be 1 year, it could be 2 years, as the case might be. And everybody knew that this young woman and this young man are betrothed. They're like husband and wife, practically. And until the husband comes, he would take this bride to his mother's tent or back to his home. And the whole village, hallelujah, and they're singing, and like the wedding feast at Cana. But that night, after the celebration, and everyone is gone, he takes the bride into his mother's tent, into the bedroom chamber, and they make love for the first time. The next morning, he's expecting to see evidence of her virginity. Usually, if she isn't, he could send her back home. In fact, she would be stoned. She could be killed. If not, he proves, yes, she maintained herself pure. So sex meant I am now entering into marital life. If a young girl who was not betrothed had sex with a young man, that was it. You had to get married. That was marriage. So God is saying, therefore, he wanted us to recognize that intimacy isn't something you share with everyone. It should be preserved for that special relationship. When you meet someone you can trust and spend the rest of your life with.
Yeah. And I think even to add on to that, Pastor, it's one of those areas even for the church that we should really maybe make a more enticing case of why it's important for us to pursue sex inside of marriage. Because even as you're talking about guilt-free, happy, one thing I can add there is secure as well. And I think the one beauty of sex in marriage is this sense of security it gives you. And really the whole proposition of why you should wait is not just that it's wrong, but it's also for your own benefit if you're really to enjoy it in its proper context. Because as you're saying, if you're picking from Jane, Jerry, and Tom and everybody, and then when you meet that right person, you're not giving them your purity, you're not giving them your all, you're giving them a quarter of who you are because you've shared yourself. It becomes that much more challenging for you to then.
It really does. In fact, Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, 16 to 18 talks about the fact that when a man and a woman come together, they actually become one. He says, with sex, you are joined to a prostitute. He says, talking to the guy that they shouldn't be going out to prostitute. He says, you are joined to her, meaning part of you stays with her. Part of her stays with you. And truly, the experience goes with you into your marriage. And there are many homes and marriages that are suffering today because there's a woman who can't erase the images of her first boyfriend, the first guy who had her. There's a man who's still expecting his wife to perform like Angela did. And so you take into your marriage a part of that person. She brings into the marriage a part of that person. And Paul is saying, you don't want to bring anything else or anyone else into that tight circle. So you are right. If our young people can understand that, and even older people as well, it could save a lot of heartache and pain. Plus, it's like giving a piece of a cake and sharing it up. If I give a piece to you and a piece to you and a piece to you and a piece to you, it gets smaller and smaller. And so what you give your husband then is less than he or she, or your wife is less than he or she deserves, because you've shared so much of yourself. And I found two people begin to get confused as to what love is and who they really love, because I was in love with her today, and then after 6 months, now I'm in love with this one, and then after 5 months, I'm in love with this one, and it becomes a confusing emotion.
Yeah, so let's move to the other side of that. That is extramarital sex. That's another challenge, really, to the sanctity and the beauty of sex.
Within the context of marriage, yes. Now, this one is a tricky one, because when I get married, there are certain needs that I expect to have met in marriage. Social needs, emotional needs, physical needs like food and clothes, etc. And also physical needs in terms of passion, sex. Like I said before, sex needs excitement and unpredictability, etc. to keep that fire going. But then in marriage, because so many things come into the pot, a lot of times this need is met, especially for men. And I have found that many times when people go out of marriage, they are seeking out of marriage that which legitimately they should have in marriage. So because I'm not getting it within marriage, I go looking for it. It is like you go to a supermarket and you have a list of maybe 10 items, and you buy your flour and your sugar and your rice and stuff, and then you realize there's no butter and there are no eggs. But you need this. What do? You
move to the next one.
Yes, you go to another supermarket to get these things supplied. So I'm saying, in a sense, when people are in a marriage and their needs that are not being met, something in them is crying out, I need this thing met. So they look outside to those who would provide it. For men, it may simply be the satisfaction of really passionate sex and lovemaking. But for many women, it's that emotional bonding and connection that they desire. And because they're not getting it with their husband, they begin to get that attention from Deacon Roy or somebody or their co-worker. And because women are so emotional with their sex, for them, sex represents the culmination of all that emotional connection. Usually when a woman begins to find emotional satisfaction in a man, sex is usually not far behind, because the two are so bound in a woman's heart. Men are able to dichotomize much more readily sex from the emotional needs and all the other things.
Which is also a dangerous thing, because then we have issues like pornography, which we'll be talking about, which is another form of adultery that is of a more physical nature than emotional.
Yes, pornography is sexual thrill without emotional connection and commitment. Someone needs to release sexually and have that thrill of sex, but without all the work of a relationship, which is why people who become addicted to pornography find that it's difficult to maintain relationships with living people, because pornography allows me all of this without going through all the drama of a relationship, of communication and everything else. And it becomes very addictive because it's readily available. It's wild. It could be anything you want it to be.
Yeah, and it's affected the whole spectrum. I mean, in the church, the numbers are the same as out in the secular world. Over 60% of the men in the church actually apparently access pornographic sites, and over 20% of the women. So it's affecting us in a very real way today in the society.
Because those of us who are in the church are of the world. In other words, we come from the world, and many of us come with our baggage. Mm-hmm. Like I said before, with marriage, etc. Not everyone was born into Christianity or born into the church. So they are bringing all these experiences with them, and some of them have not been able to set free. But even sometimes among those in the church, these habits catch on, and sometimes they get caught in that vicious circle. The thing, though, Joel, is that in marriage, we need to keep the fires burning. And unfortunately, many married couples are not enjoying a rich, vibrant sex life. In fact, many marriages are what we call sexless marriages. The couple have sex less than once a month. And for some couples, that is still even a lot. Once it's less than a month, it's considered practically a sexless marriage. And far too many couples are living like that, like brother and sister. And so when that co-worker looks at you and smiles that special way, when that deacon looks at you and compliments you, oh, what a lovely dress you're wearing, Sister Angela, and you're thinking, my husband didn't even recognize it. I changed my hairstyle 2 weeks ago and Tony never even mentioned it. And here is Deacon Roy showing me appreciation. Something jumps in her heart and she feels fulfilled. Somebody's noticing me. Somebody's valuing me. While the man who is in my home, whose name I carry, isn't. So gradually, she begins to talk more to Deacon Roy. Hi! And friendship could blossom into something else. Similarly, a husband may be thinking, my wife no longer is turned on by me. She no longer offers herself to me. Or usually, she just lies there emotional, whatever have you, and is it that I've lost everything? Is it that she no longer cares? And then here's this, oh, you look so handsome and so tall. Wow, you're so strong. Then, what do you think happens? He begins to realize my ego is being touched. And then the next thing. Mm-hmm. So that is why we see a lot of times adultery happening or extramarital sex. People are looking to fulfill needs outside of marriage that are not being met
in marriage.
In their marriage.
Yeah. So, Pastor, as we come to the end of this episode, which I'm sure we just touched the surface in many of these areas.
There are a couple more things that we need to touch before we end. So we may just need to run on.
And there's these other aspects of sexual deviations that exists within the sexual context as well, where with issues like homosexuality now that are big into society and really causing a lot of turmoil within relationships in the church and even outside the church.
Yes. Before we go to homosexuality, there is also sexual addiction. There are people who become addicted just to the thrill of sex. Just as some people become addicted to cocaine or to some other drug. All of these represents, as you rightly said, deviations, distortion of the beautiful gift of sex that God created. And the Bible in Ezekiel 16 and 17 paints a very lurid and painful picture of sexual addiction, using Israel to refer to Israel who keeps going after false gods. So God is picturing a woman with an insatiable sexual appetite who is looking for love in all the wrong places, that she even pays men to have relationships with her. And God says, that's how you are spiritually. Well, there is something, a sexual addiction, but it can be helped with therapy. It can be helped, but that is something that is also in the church that we cannot turn our backs on. Some people do become addicted to sex. And as such, they can ruin their marriage and ruin many other things. So now, we go to homosexuality. What can we really say about homosexuality? As a younger person, Joel, what is the world? What is the buzzword about homosexuality? How do people view homosexuality, let's say outside of the church?
I mean, it's becoming more and more accepted as a norm, as part of the society. I think there is a real move towards identifying and recognizing same-sex marriages as legitimate relationships.
So you're saying the world has come to sort of embrace, in a sense, homosexuality.
Right.
Should we in the church embrace it?
It's a challenging question. I think to the degree that we define marriage as the joining of a man and a woman, it becomes a real challenge to then say that we can incorporate this deviation as part of how we build a community, because clearly Scripture lays out what this picture of a family is formed of.
Father, mother, and their offspring, and even the extended family. Mm-hmm. So in Scripture, there's nothing as a same-sex couple. Even though the Bible does acknowledge homosexuality as existing even way back then. I would like to say, Joel, that this is an area where the church has to really grapple with, not in the typical condemning way. Oh, these homosexuals are perverts, they are miscreants, they are people who just don't want to follow God's way. But recognize this is a real situation. There are some people who are genetically predisposed to homosexuality. They are literally born that way. And most of us know of a little boy who 2, 3, 4 years old began to show a lot of feminine traits and likes, or that girl who seemed to be so manly in her attitude. We've all known them. And it isn't that they chose it. It is that it was chosen for them. There are people who are born genetically with their chromosome, they're like guys, with their Y chromosome kind of messed up because of what they got from their mother. And there's too much going through now, but yeah, they can actually show where certain women, if you look at their X chromosome, because women have 2 X chromosomes, there's one methylation, they call it. That is a change that takes place on it, that these women tend to produce homosexual sons or gay sons. And in some families, there are 2, 3 people who are born gay or homosexual. What I'm saying is, you and I, as heterosexuals, as those of us who follow the divine plan of man and woman, can never understand what it means for someone who, from the time he was a child, felt attracted to someone of the same sex. You know, we like to say God made Adam and Eve, not Adam and Steve. It's true. God made Adam and Eve and not Adam and Steve. In the same way, God made Adam and Eve and not Adam and Eva, Yvonne and Yvette. But polygamy came into the world, and God looked at it and said, okay, we need to deal with this. I am saying as a church, we need not to condemn them, but find a way to help them deal with the fact that they may have to choose a celibate life, even while desiring all that you and I desired when we got married. So you have men who know they are men, but just are attracted to other men. Women who know they are women, but are attracted to other women. But there are men who feel like a woman trapped in a man's body and see their body as being ill-formed because I'm a woman, or women who feel I'm a man and I don't know what this body is doing, and they try to band down their breasts or cut it off and stuff because in their mind they really feel, I can't even begin to understand. There are some people who are born with sexual characteristic of both male and female, hermaphrodites, actually man and woman almost. There are some people who hormonal balance, men with a lot of estrogen, women with a lot of testosterone, who tend to be very manly as a woman with a lot of testosterone, or a man with a lot of estrogen, very soft and curvy. All I'm saying is sin messed up this planet. It caused lions to become carnivorous and to hunt other animals. It caused plants to die and thorns to grow. It also messed up our DNA.
Sexuality.
So that some of us are born outside of the realm of what God placed there. And I think about myself when I was as a young man, beginning to feel the stirrings of passion and desire. And you say, you got to hold it together. But always there was a thought, I will get married. And I will find that one, and we will live and enjoy this pleasure forevermore. But what about that young gay guy who's also Christian, who loves Jesus and wants to follow Jesus, who recognizes I may never have a chance to experience love, and I want to experience the passion of love and the desire of love. And if you add on to that condemnation, ostracism, do you see how we've made the burden heavier? Mm-hmm. And I've pushed many of them away from church. I personally know of at least 3 people who were pushed away from church because in struggling with their homosexuality, what they got was condemnation, snickers, sneers, rejection, and they couldn't handle it anymore. So that is something as a church we have to come to grips with. They are among us. They are some of our own children who went to our Christian schools, who grew up in Sabbath school and Sunday school, have found themselves being gay, homosexual.
And Pastor, maybe this even goes back to a topic we were talking about 2 weeks ago, this idea of being alone. And I think the church is meant to create such a warm, welcoming space where the people among us who cannot find partners can still find such intimate interactions with other people, which
in a non-sexual manner.
in a non-sexual manner that can satisfy to some level. And I'm not saying that this will solve the problem. To some level, those intimate needs for connection, for intimacy, for companionship.
It will assuage the pain somewhat. There was this lady who was a lesbian who got baptized and started coming to church. And she loved working with young people, so she wanted to work with the Pathfinders. Do you know there were members who went to question her about her motives and were afraid to send their daughters to Pathfinders? It is as though we believe that every gay person is a pervert, just a predator, seeking whom he or she may devour. And yet there are same-sex couples who have had long relationships, faithful relationships. So we are not endorsing homosexuality. But what we are saying is we need to be able to help them over that barrier, to find some either peace with their situation, become abstinent, to become celibate, and not make them feel like the scum of the earth, like their sin is worse than any other sin, as if God hasn't spoken about other types of sin, including sexual sin, that are just as bad. And when God condemns, he doesn't condemn the homosexual worse than anyone else, as if there's a special place in hell that's hotter than any other place and marked for homosexuals only. No. Actually, the sins that God hates, that the Bible says God hates, have nothing to do with homosexuality, adultery, premarital sex, or any of these other things that we consider the worst things. God says, I hate a lying tongue. I hate the prideful spirit. I hate that person who spreads strife among brethren. So we see God's attitude to humanity and our weakness is different from our attitude to those in their weakness. So finally, I would like to just simply end by going back to what we talked about, keeping the flame alive in marriage. For it is one thing to recognize that in marriage, sex tends to become, predictable and sometimes boring, sometimes non-existent, and which creates a temptation. It's another thing to recognize perhaps you can help. I could share some of the things that I've discovered that have worked for me, and I know it works for others too, in terms of keeping the flame alive. So here goes. Number 1, be intentional about sex in your marriage. Invest time and thought in making it meaningful. Don't let it just happen, because it will not happen with all the other things. So we need to be intentional. Okay, Thursday night or Saturday night or whatever have you.
I know you and Cynthia actually have maintained Thursday as a date night for the longest time.
Yes. And that has helped us so much. Just having that date where we put everything aside and she and I go out and connect romantically, connect as two persons. So I say, in keeping with that intentionality, let's be sure we sometimes try a different place, a different technique, a different time than just the normal. I do something called an eye fast. For something a whole month, I resist looking at Cynthia change or look at her in any intimate clothes.
That's EYE fast.
Yes, an eye fast. So my eyes are fasting. I'm not looking. So then after like a month of that, when I actually get to behold her beauty and all her beauty, it's like, wow, like I'm almost for the first time. So I do that ever so often. I just don't look at her. I also have noticed that it helps me not to be so normal around her. Like for instance, as a husband and wife, you're brushing your teeth in front of your wife, you're on the toilet bowl and she's there talking to you in the bathroom and vice versa. That's too common. So ever so often and for a long time, I try to lock the door. If she's there, I don't go in. If I'm in there, don't come in. I don't brush my teeth in front of her. It might sound foolish, but it doesn't foolish. It allows that mysticism, that little something. Because when you were courting, you didn't see your wife brushing her teeth, your girlfriend. And there was that something that was mysterious. Then vacations. Away from the normal place, in a hotel, in a different place, with sexy lingerie, with nice perfume. Keep the fire burning. And then controlled abstinence. To not give in to the desire when you feel like it. I feel to make love to my wife. No, hold it back. Hold it back for 2-3 weeks. This is a deliberate controlled abstinence. What that does, it builds tension and desire. So you can hardly wait to see your wife, hardly wait to hug her, hardly wait to see him. Why? Because normally as a husband or wife, if you feel you roll over, you say, let's do it, or okay, Saturday, Sunday, whatever have you. But if you're holding back, like when you were single and you were waiting for that marriage, oh, I can't wait for the honeymoon because I've been holding back. Well, I'm saying sometimes to do that, deliberately resist the desire when it comes. So it builds. And then when you do come together, there'll be great passion and desire. So these 4 points, I think, are starting point. Things work differently for different people, but I think this should prime the pump to start finding ideas, because if you don't keep it alive, it will die in marriage. And the devil is waiting right at the door to pull you out and to put you somewhere else that could cause great pain and discomfort and who knows what damage. So basically, my brothers and sisters, our friends, we are saying sex was meant to be a beautiful, guilt-free, happy union between husband and wife, pleasurable beyond measure for their whole marriage. We are saying that sin came in and spoiled many things about it. But as Christians, knowing God's plan and recognizing what a great joy this could be, we need to put it in its right place, be intentional about keeping the flame alive in our marriages, and helping our young people to know, if you wait, good things come to those who wait.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Let Us Go Deeper. Let Us Go Deeper is an independent ministry, and your support is critical to our operations. Please make any contributions that you can to patreon.com/LUGD. That is patreon.com/LUGD.